Hi everybody, and welcome to another SANDCRAFT Motorsports DIY installation. Today, we're going to be installing the steering rack stabilizer on a Can-Am X3. Let's get started. First step we're going to do is raise up the front end of the vehicle and set it on some safety support jacks. Then we'll be removing the front wheels. Next, we're going to remove the zip tie that holds the boot to the steering rack. Now we're going to remove the 4 plastic rivets securing the weather seal to the floor. And now we're going to move to the outer tie rod ends and remove the 18mm bolt. And we'll do the same on the passenger side. After the tie rod is removed, we're over here on the passenger side and we're going to remove the mounting bolts for the steering rack. These are also 18mm hardware. And 2 with the strap. Back over here on the driver's side, we're going to be removing the sway bar end link. This is requiring a 19mm wrench and 18mm socket. And then the upper, which is also the 19mm wrench and 18mm socket. So what we're going to do is align the steering wheel to center and make an alignment mark for when we go back together, we know exactly where we left off. Then we're going to remove the lower pinch bolt, which is 2 13mm. Now we're ready to remove the 3 larger mounting bolts for the steering rack, which is a nut and bolt, both 18mm. What I prefer to do, just to make life a little simple without a shop buddy, is use a pair of locking pliers to hold the bolt placed for me, and then I remove the nut from the inside. We're back in here in the driver's footwell, right behind the brake and throttle pedals, to remove the 3 18mm that secure the rack to the frame. And nut number 3. So now that we have all of the mounting hardware loose and or removed, the rack is pretty much free to come out. It's just a little bit of wiggle action back and forth, and it does help to have a shop buddy assist you, but it is possible to do it by yourself. Now we have to go to the other side. Back over here on the passenger side, to ease removal of the rack assembly, we're going to remove the rack bracket. We will be reusing this. And now the whole tie rod and steering rack assembly as a whole will slide out through the driver's side. So now we're ready to try and finesse the rack out of the vehicle. There is a small spacer plate that goes behind, so make sure that that doesn't take off on you. We are going to be reinstalling the spacer plate also. And there you have it. All right, we'll start by removing the passenger side equipment. We're going to use a 22 and crack our jam nut loose, and then we'll be using a 36mm wrench for our tie rod, and both left and right are right hand threads. We're going to set the tie rod aside because we will not be using it with the stabilizer kit. We are going to be reusing the inner tie rod end. Now we're going to fold down the locking tabs and remove the two mounting bolts that are 19 millimeters from the tie rod bracket. Remove the bracket from the body and discard. So here we have unboxed the SANDCRAFT RCR X3 Steering Rack Stabilizer. The unit comes semi-assembled for packaging. What we're going to do is begin to break it back down for assembly to the steering rack. We're going to start with both side bolts that are a 12-point half-inch socket. We're going to remove the side seals. On the top of the body, there's two 3mm Allen screws. These are the shaft retainers and bolt retainers. I'm going to remove the shaft. And then we're going to slide out our Delrin shaft bushings. The first step to reassembly is mounting the SBM to the factory steering rack using an 18mm socket. Next step to assembly is installing the Delrin bushings. We're going to be installing the long segment inbound to the body of the SBM. Once I get them started, I like to use just a screwdriver and get them nice and seated all the way inside. Again, the long end of the body inbound. We're going to lock the Delrin sleeves in place with our 3mm Allens. Torque them down. Now it's time to install our shaft seals. We're going to be installing them with the lip facing outbound. Lip facing outbound. And these seals are rather tough, so you can be fairly aggressive with them. And now it's time for the shaft. The indexed wrench end can go left or right. It's just there for ease of installation. We install the shaft from the passenger side. Just give it a little twisting motion. And now we fit the X301 to the driver's side. Now we can install our inner tie rod ends. I'm going to apply some thread locker. And thread them right into the SBM. Same for the driver's side. And then we're going to torque them. What I like to do is install the hardware into the body so that way I don't have to cycle the suspension. I can leave the rest of the suspension intact. The short bolt goes on the most out hole. The longer two go on the inbound. And we will be reinstalling the backing plate that sits behind the rack up against the frame. All right, we're ready to put the assembly in the vehicle. Back on the passenger side here, now we can install the factory rack bracket. Slide it in. We're going to take the X302 with an M10 bolt. We're going to install the 19mm metal lock nut. And then the lower as well. Now back on the driver's side, we're going to engage the steering coupler and then slide the rack back up to the frame. Going to trap our steering with a 13mm bolt. And now we're ready to start tightening the main body up. So what we're going to do is put the all metal lock nuts, no washers, directly back on. And we're going to tighten them 1, 2, and 3 in sequence. I'm going to reinstall my locking pliers. And I'm going to tighten the bolt. Now we're going to install the 12-point half-inch bolt through the X302 into the stabilizer shaft. We're not going to tighten it all the way, we're just going to install it as an alignment piece. Just far enough to where we can get access with our other 10mm Allen and 19mm wrench, and we'll start by tightening the top. And we'll tighten the lower. And now we'll go and tighten the through bolt. Once all the steering rack and pinion hardware has been installed and secured, you want to check the steering range of motion to make sure that there isn't any binding. If there is, loosen all hardware and re-torque through the sequence. Now we're going to tighten up the steering coupler. Next is our sway bar link. I'm going to tighten these down with an 18mm socket and 19mm wrench. The passenger side is just like the driver's side. Right hand thread, and it has to be twisted on a minimum of 25mm. All right. Remove the zip tie and connect our outer tie rod end to the knuckle. We're going to tighten the bolt to 18mm. Don't forget your cotter pin. Now we can reinstall the weather seal down on the steering column. We'll reinstall the 4 plastic pop rivets. And we're going to seal the deal up by reinstalling a zip tie around the boot. One of the other features of the SANDCRAFT Steering Rack Stabilizer is that we replace the outer tie rod end with a left-hand thread tine so that you can make quick steering angle adjustments to set it exactly where you would like it. All you have to do is simply tighten down one 15/16 jam nut and one 22mm jam nut. All right, now it's time to reinstall the wheels. Well, that's a wrap on the SANDCRAFT Motorsports DIY X3 Steering Rack Stabilizer. Go ahead and jump on over to SANDCRAFTmotorsports.com for new product releases and merch. Go ahead and follow us on social media, and always enjoy the ride.